This is Good morning, everyone. We'll just wait a minute or two more before we get started. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Welcome to the 19th installment of my virtual office hours weekly address. People continue to say they appreciate these weekly live stream addresses, so I'll continue them as long as the shelter in place lasts, and probably a lot longer. This Facebook Live event allows me to give you some updates, which people really appreciate, condensing the news for the week, answering some questions, and of course, providing some words of encouragement for everybody sheltering in place during these difficult times. So, thank you for allowing me to continue to represent you and work for the city of Sunnyvale during these extraordinary times. Please remember to take care of yourself, both physically and mentally. And if you need help, definitely there's numbers from the city standpoint. If you go to the city website, if you need medication, if you need food delivered, If you need support from Sunnyvale Community Services, all that's available. And, I've been helping multiple people in the past few weeks get in contact with different county services to make sure that they're doing okay. Keep following the county health orders. Remember, you can do your part to help stop the spread of the virus, by washing your hands, not touching your face, maintain a safe social distance when you're out, and only really going out for essential items if at all possible. Reduce the number of people that you're coming in contact with on a daily basis. And of course, most importantly, wear your mask. It helps, it's mandatory. And, as we look at the numbers of people that aren't wearing masks when they're out, and this is some of the issues around, California as well as around the nation. This is why, we're seeing such an uptick in the number of coronavirus cases. So, as I've said before, if you need a face covering, please contact me. There are groups that are sewing and having the mayor distribute. They're giving them to their neighbors. It's most important that you, if at all possible, have a reusable mask as opposed to a one-time use mask. I still see gloves and masks strewn about the streets when I'm on my morning run. So hopefully, you have a mask, get into the habit of, washing it as soon as you get home from being out at the grocery or whatever, washing your hands, washing your mask, letting it dry. And you should always have basically 2 masks ready whenever you can. So, we're not out of the woods yet. You can be a carrier, or people that you can meet can be a carrier and be asymptomatic, not showing any symptoms. So please be careful whenever you're, interfacing with anyone, of course. So we're now 129 days after the March 16th shelter in place that started the whole effort with the county's order to basically limit the spread of COVID-19. And since that declaration, a lot has happened. A lot happens every day. I have daily conference calls to be on, or press conferences to watch. I confer, I advocate on your behalf as much as possible. And so, it's been good for me, to represent you and try to push for, whatever we can as far as testing, as far as tracing, as far as, additional resources for our city. So let's kind of go through what happened in the last few weeks, or basically last week and a half, pretty much. So last Monday, July 13th, the new county health order went into place. And of course, that order allowed various businesses, service industries, salons, barbershops, hair supplies, hair salons, massage studios, Pilates studios, gyms to reopen, and then gatherings of up to 60 people outside, all with masks and safe, socially distanced. And so that was good. The county had given businesses about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks to prepare for that, and so that was good when the state allowed that variance. But of course, that same Monday, Governor Newsom at a press conference turned the dimmer switch down on operations in the state and decided that no restaurant indoor dining, no wineries or tasting rooms could be open, movie theaters had to close, card rooms had to close, bars, breweries, pubs, indoor and outdoor operation had to close. And so that was immediately done around the state. And then he, of course, Governor Newsom also said that Santa Clara was about to be put on the watch list, which limited, all the personal services that could happen. So that was difficult for, and I've heard from multiple, massage therapists, from multiple hair salons and barbers, that this was difficult. They'd spent all this money to kind of prepare to open up. And then, of course, 2 days later, Wednesday morning, so that was on the 15th, after we were put on the watch list, all those personal services were then required to close. And so, that was closing, all fitness, all gyms, non-essential sectors. So personal services, hair salons, barbershops, nail salons, body waxing, tattoo parlors, shopping malls, and, and all the gyms and all that had to close as of last Wednesday. So that was difficult. Uh, of course, that was kind of matching what's being done in other counties around the state, and so this is the governor making that decision for the entire state to a large degree and trying to limit the spread. Although definitely, if you look at what's been happening around the state, over the last week and a half, there's been a large uptick in the number of coronavirus cases, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Uh, and then last Friday, uh, so Governor Newsom announced new guidance for reopening schools, and I mentioned at last week's address that was coming midday, and so you know the governor basically said that that whole watch list of what your county's doing becomes kind of the in-person criteria for reopening schools. So schools and school districts may reopen for in-person instruction at any time that the local health jurisdiction has not been on the county monitoring list for the prior 14 days. So this at least gave some direction to the school districts from a state level that they could that most school districts wouldn't be able to open, especially now. And I know that there were a few schools that were actually opening last Friday, and so they immediately had to start distance learning. And most of the school districts and schools are looking to focus on remote learning, at least for the first part of the school year. That being said, there are those people that are pushing for uh, in person schooling, and so that is an issue that they basically are saying their kids aren't learning from home. That is a difficulty, and from that standpoint, the governor is laid down the law. That being said, it was welcome news for a lot of parents that had a lot of concerns, and teachers who had concerns about returning to the classrooms. But there was also a variance that was allowed in there, which was a little odd. There was a provision that a waiver could be provided uh, depending upon that beyond that criteria for elementary schools to open for in-person instruction. So for K through 6, there was conceivable that remote learning was a lot more difficult for the younger kids, and so there was that option put in there. That being said, I think the majority of parents and teachers would at least like to start with distance learning, to make sure that figuring out what's safe, from an in-person standpoint. uh, it's there's a there's testing requirements. So the governor laid out, and from his state order, all kinds of requirements if they actually were open. So if a school district was not on the watch list for 14 days and decided to open up, there were all kinds of criteria for testing the teachers, testing the students, testing all the staff, basically every 2 weeks, and making sure that they're getting those results and they're being monitored. And it's all the teachers as well as the other professionals, the cafeteria workers, the janitors, the bus drivers. It's important that everyone get tested. We'll see how many schools actually want to go for a waiver. So how many elementary schools might want to go for a waiver in the short term. But from at least what I'm hearing from most of the school board members, they're focusing on remote learning and then looking to see if there are niche areas where they can actually do in classroom training, but that would ultimately be very limited. So we'll see where that goes. And then as far as this week is concerned, on Tuesday, the controversy around Caltrain continues. So I talked about this last week, that San Francisco Board of Supervisors last week, last Thursday I think it was, or Wednesday, uh, basically said that they weren't going to support the 3-county tax measure of 1/8 cent sales tax for Caltrain, and so that was a big issue. I know that there was a big letter writing campaign. Caltrain officials um, had said that, so San Mateo Board of Supervisors were in favor of the 1/8 sales tax, 1/8 cent sales tax. Definitely Santa Clara and San Francisco had been wanting more control from a governance standpoint. And, from our standpoint, I can understand our county supervisors wanting more control because, from a sales tax standpoint, and Caltrain is pretty unique in that, it isn't being funded by sales tax. It's 70% fare box return. So the riders that are taking Caltrain and the businesses that are paying for whatever passes are there pay for the majority of the operation of that system. And so, it's pretty unique and one of the best performing transportation systems in the country. And so, from as opposed to BART, which gets a lot of sales tax and county money for the counties that it's doing, Caltrain is a little bit different. And so this 1/8 cents sales tax was basically to try to make sure that there's long-term funding for Caltrain, and definitely with ridership so low right now, with everybody remote working as much as possible, people not, most businesses being closed, a lot of people aren't taking Caltrain, and so it's even in more dire straits. Although, I heard the same thing about BART yesterday and today, that they're considering that they actually might have to close down, even with the funding that they're getting from the state and from the counties that they're dealing with. So from that standpoint, Caltrain is in the same boat, but the 1/8 sales tax, 1/8 cent sales tax would actually help them through these troubled times. So the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors was going to see this on Tuesday, but it was a long day of other items. They didn't get it to it until the end of the day and decided to push this off until August 11th. Definitely, they had been proposing several governance changes, and governance changes have been asked for a while now for Caltrain, but it hasn't been done. And so, this is the question of whether or not there'll be, that sales tax would be put into some sort of fund that would that the proceeds would then be in an escrow account, and then it would be controlled by the three cities from a joint powers board. Would it go directly to Caltrain? So there are questions about how that ballot measure might change. Definitely, we're running out of time for ballot measures, so the wording is pretty important. And from a Santa Clara standpoint, it would be about 40 million from our county, which is a large portion of the money that would be going into whatever that sales tax would be collecting. So Santa Clara and San Francisco would be putting in the most amount of money as opposed to San Mateo County. And so, from my standpoint, I wrote a letter and had staff write a letter to Caltrain, the boards for all three counties, trying to work on the governance as well as support a ballot measure for Caltrain, because I think it's one of the best operating transit systems that we have in the Bay Area, and I would hate to see it, fall flat on its face, just as it was going to be electrified, just as that was wrapping up, and once things were electrified, we could run a lot more trains. The service could be a lot better than even it is now, although right now we're seeing people having to stand between San Jose and San Francisco because it gets so busy at different times of the day. So the electrification would be perfect for that, but this is the whole thing of it needs long-term funding. So we'll see what happens, but the BART model, and this is kind of on that same model, is having the counties that the transit system is servicing provide more long-term funding. So we'll see where that goes. And of course, that tax measure pulled very well with voters, and I think that the majority of people, and it needs 2/3 approval in order to get 2/3 of the voters to approve it in order to get passed, but it was right on that 64 to 66% in polling, which means that the majority of people actually want it. Okay, and then um, on Tuesday, let's see, and so the Board of Supervisors met, and well, there's no end date for when that governance will be resolved, but definitely all three boards are running out of time, and this is, and it's a lot of money for the 20 years that the sales tax would be in place, but it's making sure that governance and that operation of that system is solid, and it lays the framework for what transportation is in the long term for the Bay Area. Every one of those Caltrain riders is one less car that's on 101 and 280 going north or south every morning. Okay, and then on Wednesday at a lunchtime press conference, Governor Newsom reopened California. So he actually, let's talk about one thing. So first he reported that there had been almost 13,000 new coronavirus cases on Tuesday. So that's the highest reported daily total that the state has recorded so far. And so that was a little eye-opening that we've now, and California has now surpassed New York in the total number of COVID-19 cases, with more than 410,000, 415,000, I think the numbers are now. Of course, the population of California is a lot larger than any other state, so it is kind of apples to oranges sort of thing. That being said, we do have the most number of cases of any state, and then of course we've also been testing more and all that, but at the end of the day, it is a little scary from that standpoint of the number of people that are being infected, and especially you see some of the counts in Southern California, and we have our counts have been kind of still ticking up in the Bay Area, but you look at the numbers in Southern California, and it is a little scary. But also at the press conference, and this had been talked about for several weeks, Governor Newsom announced that California would waive statewide licensing regulations for barbershops, nail salons, and massage parlors so that they could take their services outside if they adhere to new public health rules. So, that was important, and so for all those people that weren't able to get their hair cut on the first 2 days, and the only 2 days that the order was lifted last week, this is an opportunity that if those barbershops or hair salons are moving their service outdoors, people can finally take advantage of that and get their hair cut. And so, this guidelines, and there were all kinds of guidelines about, how often, how much spacing there is, how much the tools in the chairs and everything that they're using needs to be cleaned down. So, it was actually pretty important as far as laying out a roadmap. That being said, I wish this had been done, a month ago or a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, which, as opposed to kind of set the expectation that these services would be happening indoors. So these salons and barbershops and, basically added all the interior, conceivable partitions between the different chairs and other things. And now the question is whether or not these would can actually move outside. So we'll see. Tattoo parlors and piercings aren't allowed because of hygiene requirements, but those limited personal hair items can occur outdoors, under a tent, under a canopy, under sun shelters of some kind. So being outside is the important thing here at the end of the day. And it's outdoor. Basically the big movement is to go outdoors as much as possible, and both employees and their clients need to wear masks. Stations need to be placed 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart, and there's a frequent disinfecting, must take place as far as all the equipment, all that. So, it is a big effort as far as that's concerned for any for any business owner, especially those personal service owners. And then on Wednesday, so Wednesday afternoon, and I talked about this last week, Sunnyvale held its second listening event. And so, we had our first listening event in late June. And this was in response to the calls for police reform. The city is committed to being transparent, to listening, and then, re-examining our policies, our practices, and our programs. And so the Department of Public Safety 2 or 3 weeks ago, released information on the police use of force, and then we've discontinued the carotid control hold. We've done a lot of operations from that standpoint, but and we'll continue to release information. But the city has dedicated itself to hosting a series of listening sessions. So the first listening session was June 25th, and it had around 200 attendees. This was a virtual dialogue, so everyone on a Zoom meeting or a phone call. And the latest one, which happened on Wednesday, was a conversation with a partnership and focused on youth. And so it was a partnership between Fremont Union High School District, Sunnyvale School District, and students from the Youth Public Policy Institute. So Sunnyvale youth and interested community members participated. It was a good conversation. We had a lot of questions that we'd received ahead of time from parents, from students, and our city website. If you and ultimately, if you want to go back and look at that, there's a YouTube feed for the first session as well as the second session. If you have additional questions, if you just want more information about that, our efforts, definitely visit sunnyvale.ca.gov/unity. And the city website will have, all the information. Will have links to the previous videos, and we're still looking at adding, additional sessions in the future. And there's a few, ideas about what those sessions could be. But we're going to continue that dialogue. And to me, that's really important, is making sure that people are part of this dialogue, raising their questions, raising their concerns, and making sure that people, young and old, feel safe in our community. And let's kind of go on to, so that's kind of a quick update for the week. I know that the governor has another press conference this afternoon at noon. So who knows what that press conference is going to be. I hear that the governor conceivably is going to do more restrictions. I'm not really sure what those are going to be. Well, we shall see. But definitely, I've heard that, conceivably outdoor gatherings from a state standpoint might be reduced. Beach, people on beaches. So there's a lot of speculation on what that might be. But it's all to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And so, from the county dashboard standpoint, the number of new cases did increase, over the last week. So the total number of cases now is 8,533 cases. That's up 1,400 cases from about 1,400 cases since last week at this time. And last week we had increased about 1,300 cases from the week before. So we've been 1,400 this week, 1,300 the week before, and 1,000 the week before that. So it's been steadily upticking from a county standpoint. And I'd say the majority of those cases are in, East San Jose and South San Jose. And specifically from a San Jose standpoint, San Jose now has, of that 8,000, 8,500, 5,500, I don't know, 5,623, 5,523 were from San Jose. And so that's up 925 in the last week, compared to about 900 the week before. So it's San Jose's been ticking up, and let's see, Sunnyvale itself has ticked up. We now have had 417 cases. That's 59 more than last week. So it's been about the same. We had 53 last week, so we're in the 50s. 53 the week before, so and then I think 59 the week before that. So it's been around the mid to high 50s for several weeks from a Sunnyvale standpoint. And then as far as countywide rates, from a hospitalization standpoint, we have 173 people hospitalized as opposed to 143 last week, so that increased a large percentage. And then the number of deaths, we had 5 in the last week, so the number of deaths in the county is at 181. That's compared to let's see, that compares. So we've had 5 deaths in the last week as opposed to 10 deaths last in the previous week. So we're still having people being infected, being hospitalized, and from a sad standpoint, dying from COVID-19. So this is unlike any flu we've seen as far as the numbers continue far into the summer from that standpoint. And this is why people really need to wear their masks. It's the most preventable from that standpoint, functionality of making sure that you aren't getting exposed to other people that are symptomatic or asymptomatic out in the world. So definitely, I'm hoping our numbers tick down this week. As far as I see, things are still kind of ticking up slightly or staying about the same. We'd love to see things tick down, and we'll see where things go. So let's get on to the weekly questions. So this is a final request for nominations, and this was we talked about this last week. Do you know someone who's done something outstanding in Sunnyvale? And from our standpoint, we have our Sunnyvale Community Awards that we announce the State of the City every year, and the State of the City will be sometime in September. It looks like this year it's going to be fully virtual because that's the world that we're living in right now. There won't be the big speeches outdoors. There won't be, there'll still be some speeches, but there'll still be the most important part of that is, in my standpoint, is the community awards. It's our chance to recognize different people or groups in our city that have done a fantastic job. So keep in mind. So if you have an idea, and here's the categories, one of which is Distinguished Resident of the Year, Educator of the Year, High School Student of the Year, Business of the Year, Contribution to the Arts, and Environmental Achievement. And so if you know of anyone that you think you would like to nominate, you only have a few days. So Sunday is the deadline. Sunday the 28th is the deadline. So go visit the Sunnyvale website, sunnyvale.ca.gov, and search for Community Awards, or take a look at one of my Facebook posts over the last week to get a better idea as far as how you go through that process of basically nominating someone who's done a great job in our community. So if you have an idea, definitely put forth that person's name or that group's name. So let's go to some of the questions from Robbie. So thanks to the 2018 state law, records related to force that resulted in serious injury, sexual assault, or dishonesty by an officer are public. It is important that residents of Sunnyvale know our rights. And so, yes, Robbie, you're correct. I went into that state bill, SB 1893. I'm probably getting the state bill wrong. And I talked it over with our city attorney, with our chief, definitely. And that's one of the reasons why we went and basically published our use of force items. And so, there are rules about how much information can be published and what what happens as far as who the victims are, who the officers are. And so that's one of the things but it is important. It is part of the public record, especially for those three items. Although, I hear that other police forces in the area don't think that they need to actually publish the use of force in other items. So I'm actually surprised from that standpoint, as far as police departments not following the basically the legislation that was put in place in 2018. So definitely, our police force completely understands, and that's why we were, so open as far as let's summarize all the events and publicize, in a very concise form what happened, what the cases were, and what the use of force is within our department. Another question from Nicola. Do you know what kind of construction is going on at Sunnyvale School District office maintenance yard? So I had this question from two different residents, and so this project is actually a bigger project. So I heard back from the school district. The project in the maintenance yard consisted of a removal of an old warehouse building that was there, and a classroom, a portable classroom that was there that was mainly used as a break room for district workers. And ultimately, it's replacing that with a new warehouse building, which will provide, storage space for operations, for the operations department, as well as a staff workspace. But additionally, it's adding some environmental things as far as, it's adding charging stations to support 4 new EV buses. So I'm happy to see that the school district is moving to electric vehicles in their bus system. And they received actually a grant from the Bay Area Quality Management District to actually install those EVs. So it's actually good from an environmental standpoint, but that operation is actually coming to completion. It should finish in the next 6 to 8 weeks. So in the next 2 months, finally that construction will be done. And I've heard, several residents saying it's been ongoing for a while now, and the end is in sight. So that's good. Next is what's happening with the Maud Avenue reconfiguration and the new bike lanes. So I've gotten that question from multiple people too. The decision was made in May of 2016 by council and it was after a long period of community outreach and looking at different proposals. The decision was made to take out parking along Maud Avenue and put in bike lanes, and doing that reconfiguration. It was finally approved from a fiscal standpoint, I think a year ago or so. So it finally got the appropriate grants and matching funding. And so that whole street was new slurry sealed. It was remarked as far as the new car lanes and bike lanes. And then no parking signs went up about a week and a half ago. Starting on Monday of this week, they finally started enforcement. So they were putting, warnings on cars to tell them that, because people were still parking in front of their houses or in front of their apartment complexes along Maud, even though the no parking signs were up. So this week, they started ticketing. They started warning and then ticketing people as far as Maud is concerned. If people were parking in the no parking zone, blocking those bike lanes. And so part of that process, of course, was also to monitor how parking was affected in the communities around Maud. And a lot of this has to do with some of the old apartment complexes that were built in the 60s and 70s that only had one parking unit per apartment. And so from that standpoint, it was, there was kind of an assumption that people will be parking, if they have more than one car, will have to park on the street. And that's kind of seen this overflow onto Maud. And so we'll see, staff will continue to monitor this. There were several other options that were part of that outreach. One of which was to have the bike lanes only daytime, so daytime bike lanes and parking in the evenings between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. Another thing was kind of reconfiguring the street so that you remove the center lane, so the turn lane that's in the middle of Maud, and move the other lanes closer together. And so that's another option. And then basically have parking either on one side of the street or two sides, depending upon how it's set up. So there's other options that are there. We'll see how the investigation goes over the next 6 months as far as parking is concerned. Next, what's happening in downtown. So first, on Wednesday, the Downtown Association started Wednesday and Thursday night music, and so this isn't the normal Wednesday night live band. This is a DJ playing music, adding some ambiance to being downtown. So every Wednesday and Thursday night from 6 to 8 p.m. Through September, we will be having that music downtown. I dropped by, and it was actually pretty nice. It's like to actually hear some music and have a little ambiance. No dancing allowed, but it added to the experience, and I thought it was actually a good way for the Sunnyvale Downtown Association to add a little more interest as far as being in downtown Sunnyvale. And then from a downtown specific plan standpoint, City Council and other boards and commissions are seeing an update to the downtown specific plan. So the downtown specific plan and several different components are coming forward. So the downtown parking policies, an update to the downtown specific plan and its EIR, and zoning, a development agreement with City Line, and a development agreement with the developer for the old post office site. So all that is moving forward. All this started, about a year ago, and has slowly moved its way through. The final EIR is available. The final plans are available. They've already went through several of the commissions, the Heritage Commission, the BPAC, and ultimately there's a Planning Commission meeting on this coming Monday, July 27th, and then there's a special city council meeting on Tuesday, August 11th, to go through all four of these different documents. So that will be several long meetings. And actually on that same August 11th meeting, there will also be a Plaza del Sol Phase 2 approval. So there's been a lot of community outreach that happened in the fall of last year, and to refine the conceptual design for Plaza del Sol Phase 2, and that's the plaza that's right across from the Caltrain station. So if as we get closer to that date, definitely it'll be important for people to state what they like about the plan, whether or not there's still any issues, and kind of giving a final summary before we approve what the final design looks like. And then of course, so definitely take part in either the downtown plans or the vision for Plaza del Sol. And then last week I talked about Sweet Sicily, which is one of the downtown locations that was replacing Il Postale. That was supposed to open this week. They didn't finish all their paperwork, so that's been postponed. Hopefully we'll hear more in the next week or so. Let's see. From other questions. Can anyone get tested this is from Denny. Can anyone get tested for COVID-19? My husband and I want to be tested. Please provide us locations and times. So the easiest thing to do is go to sccfreetest.org, and it has a full list of all the places in the county that are happening, either pop-up locations, either permanent locations. So El Camino Hospital on Grant Road is doing testing by appointment. Planned Parenthood in Mountain View is doing testing. We're trying to get pop-up testing back in Sunnyvale. There's the Verily testing at the convention, at the fairgrounds. So the Google's supporting. So there's a lot of places around the county that people can get tested. Some for free. Some of them are through their healthcare providers. So all those are options. And so definitely, if you need a test, definitely go out and try to get tested. Uh, from from Olwen, yeah. Can you speak about combining bubbles where two households have been isolated for months? Are there any recommendations on this? Is it okay? How many people and how many households? So, and some people have already been, expanding their bubble, and hopefully people aren't breaking their bubble as far as, you know, uh, from a safety standpoint, being out in gatherings and not being safe is critical. But definitely, uh, especially families which have kids, basically merging your bubbles, it might be very useful beyond just the people that are living in one household. And all this needs to be done very safely. You know, there are definitely mental health benefits to increased socializing, but it's important that you do it very carefully to reduce your risk. And it's especially good for parents with kids. Kids want to interact, and so pairing up with another family is a great thing to do. But you need to think about that risk, and that I think is the number one priority. You need to make sure that both families, if you're expanding your bubble, and from our standpoint, we have a neighbor that we've expanded into our bubble just to socialize a little bit. But it's making sure that we are all on the same page. You need to be very clear about what you want, uh, your what you want as far as uh, guidelines. You want to make sure that you negotiate. What you're doing. Is everyone wearing a mask when they're at the store? When everyone, it's making sure that you're all in the same mindset, and that there's no hard feelings. That if people decide you know, that they don't want to pair up, that's not a deal breaker. Because some people might want to stay with just within their family because they're worried about the risk. And so everyone needs to agree to follow the same rules, whatever they are. Talk through your daily routines, and give yourself a trial period just to make sure that you know okay, let's try it for 2 weeks, and if we don't think it's working out, you know let's not do it. But it's important, and it helps parents that it's like, okay, one parent or the other can take all the kids from both families for a short time to give the second set of parents a break. And I think that's very useful, especially when you're having to deal with young children, all day long. So there's several, I've read several articles on that, and being very clear about who you're exposing yourself to is really important. So you do need to be careful. But that being said, having that social interaction, not just Zoom meetings, not just phone calls, not just 6 feet apart with masks, is critical. But considering doubling your size of your household is a possibility. You just need to be very careful about it, and you need to make sure that people, anyone in that group is not being exposed, and that's the biggest worry if you're trying to do that. Another question I've gotten is, why can't we have doubles tennis? So right now the Sunnyvale Tennis Center is not allowing doubles tennis, and I followed up with staff, and staff has followed up with the county. Right now there's a conflict. So the county's order says that doubles tennis can occur. However, the state still says that only singles tennis should be occurring, and so we're trying to get the state to clarify that. But right now, and I've heard of a few cities around us that have said, oh, we're just going to follow the county health order. That being said, it's what health order is most restrictive is what cities should be following. So if the state is more restrictive as far as singles tennis, then the county can't override that, and similarly, the county could decide to be more restrictive than the state. So that is ultimately depending upon on a county by county basis, and which one has the most restrictive issues. Let's see what other items I have. Um, oh yeah, yes. Exciting news, exciting review of the enhanced barbecue offering at the golf course. Definitely, I saw that in the Mercury News, and I'll forward that on to my Facebook page. It was one of the items that I highlighted on my now 125 plus restaurants on my daily restaurant reviews. Uh, that it was as I went through visiting the Sunken Gardens golf course. What they've done is actually brought in a new chef, and so they've kind of reimagined what their barbecue is happening there. And there's a big write up in the San Jose Mercury News last week about new offerings and kind of what the how good the food was there. So definitely, if you get a chance, go try that, and I'll republicize it again here. Let's see. Um, it's great about downtown. So Pat says it's great about downtown. Has there been any thought of what will happen when winter comes and the rain? I think there should be something we should start thinking about now. Yeah, definitely. There's already been discussions. I've already been talking to the downtown association and city staff whether or not we put tents along Murphy Avenue and heaters. This becomes a bigger question. Hopefully things are looking better by the fall, and people can at least start moving indoors with appropriate distancing. But those discussions have occurred. The question is, who pays for those tents? Are they rented? Are they there for a long-term basis? We need to figure that out. But definitely, and it's around the cities in a lot of places. Certain places that have moved outdoors actually have tents. They have heaters, and so around the city, if you go outside of Murphy Avenue, and so that is a possibility as far as that's concerned. And hopefully, as we reimagine our response and how things keep changing, these are things of trying to figure out what we can do, ways of improving everything as far as that's concerned. Let's see, any other questions? Okay, I think that's pretty much it. Uh, I've answered most of the questions. I don't think if you have other questions, definitely put them. Email me, put them in the feed. I will go back and answer them at a later date. It's kind of a continual amount of questions, either about COVID, about the city, about what's happening. There are lots of things happening in our city. The Matilda, and I'll just add a few more things. The Matilda monster, all that construction is close to completion. Definitely that's been a long time coming, and from that standpoint, I think people will be happy to see it completed. I'm happy to see. I've driven through there multiple times in the last few weeks, and it's actually really good to see finally some kind of better flow as far as Matilda, and we don't have the traffic right now, so it's hard to say how this will ultimately be when we finally get to the end. But it is important to see that construction, which actually was targeted for getting done within a year, actually moved at a rapid pace, and I would say the shelter in place helped out a little bit there, but it's actually good to see things complete on time and on schedule. Okay, so it's 9:30, about 9:30. So let's go ahead and wrap up. Thanks for joining me again this week. As always, I'm proud of Sunnyvale's response to this pandemic. This has become a new normal, and people need to figure out ways of dealing with that, ways of of being at home, being outside safely, and doing whatever they can for their community. Help your neighbors. Making sure masks, share homemade baked goods to strangers for that matter. Continue to build our community, and it's really important, especially during these critical times, these difficult times. I'm proud to see Sunnyvale residents pulling together to assist their neighbors and strangers, picking up garbage on the street, making their community a better community. So if you're out on a walk, wave, say hello to people from a safe social distance. People really miss that social interaction. and it's becoming, more difficult, especially summertime when you'd normally be out at barbecues and, at pool parties and all that. So, Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together. We'll get through this together. Thanks again for listening this week. Until next week, have a safe week. Take care, and don't forget to wear your mask. See you. Bye.